Hi, I'm George Belitsos, Executive Director of Youth and Shelter Services based here in Ames, and today we're going to review the fascinating history of the 1915 Ames Municipal Building and its conversion into the Jacobson Youth and Family Center, the new headquarters of Youth and Shelter Services. To join me today, I'm very privileged and honored to have our Ames Town historian, Farwell Brown. Thank you for joining me, Farwell, for this history of Ames and the municipal building.
Well, I very much appreciate your inviting me to be here with you. I'm very happy, and I've been looking forward to the unfolding of this project and the chance to visit with you about it.
Well, we've been selecting these slides to let the public know how the building has changed over the years and why it is Ames's first historic landmark. And as you can see here, our theme has been preserving the past and preparing for the future. And the reason we talk about preserving the past is, again, this is a historic landmark, Ames's first historic landmark as declared by the Ames City Council. And preparing for the future is our second half of our title, because this is a building now that will continue to serve the public, the young people of our community who are in or on the verge of trouble. We'll also be providing a lot of prevention services through the building, and I think our city government is very proud, and the community is very proud, and certainly Youth and Shelter Service is very proud that this historic landmark will continue to serve the public for a good many years to come into the future. Reviewing briefly the outline of the history of the City Hall, really the site that the municipal building is on, the new Jacobson Youth and Family Center, has been the site, or was the site, of city government for 104 years. From 1886 to 1915, it was a small building was on the site, which we'll see in a few minutes, which contained a one-room meeting room for the city council, our first fire wagon, and town jail, which I think Farwell says used to be known as the Hooskow. And on the same corner of Fifth and Kellogg was the Ames's first water tower. I think it was a wooden tower, wasn't it, Farwell?
That's right.
Then that building was knocked down, and we'll tell you a little bit about that. With the very quick growth of Ames in 1915, our new municipal building went up, and that's what we're going to tell you about today. And it's also been known as the Public Safety Building. Then, as you know, in 1990, it became vacant because the city moved into the new City Hall, which was formerly Central Junior High School. Mm-hmm. It was vacant for quite a few years. In the meantime, declared a historic landmark at the initiative of several of our community members in Ames who felt the building should be preserved. It was put up for public bidding, and YSS was very fortunate to be selected as the successful bidder on the project. And in a joint venture with the city, we have now remodeled, and it has become the Youth and Family Center of the Jacobson Youth and Family Center. This is how the remodeled building is looking today, but here is how it looked in 1886. Farwell, tell us about the building.
Well, as you say, the building dates from 1886. This picture was taken on about 1910. You see the Baptist church that was built that year in the background to the left. And yes, I heard that the jail was called the Hooskow. It had 2 cells in it. And the story was that on occasion, some Saturday nights and so forth, the town marshal had to rent a garage down the street for the overflow. But that was it, and the little building stood there until 1915.
And in the top floor of the building was the council chambers, and then downstairs was the fire wagon.
Right.
we look at the first Ames fire wagon, Farwell told me earlier he actually saw this fire wagon.
Well, it was still in use, you see, until 1916 or late 16 or early 17 when they got the first mechanized fire wagon. One interesting comment on that fire wagon and the horses, or at least horses of some color. In 1918, when we had the floods, you know, that took out the Squaw Creek Bridge,
Yes.
They still had that fire wagon, and they installed it in the
They did.
Champlin Garage or barn out there, where the Ames Theater is now.
Oh.
And they had some horses out there in case there was a fire in the Fourth Ward, because in those days you couldn't count on
Getting
even
to
a
that
good
side
road,
of town. Yes.
roundabout way to get the fire truck out there. So that fire wagon was still in use after 1918 until we got a new bridge on Lincoln Way.
Well, we want to describe what Ames was like around that time and what led to the city building a very large 17,000 square foot city hall from the single building that you saw on that corner. This is what Ames looked like around that time. This is, I think, the south side of Main Street. And actually, if you look at the first building to the right, that's the Ames Stationery today, and next to it is the Lazy M Shoe Store. And Youth and Shelter Services had rented up above, and of course now we're around the corner.
That's right. The building on the corner was the Ames National Bank, built there in 1913. And as you indicated, this picture was about 1915. Notice that the folks were jaywalking.
Yes, yeah, it doesn't look like
they were quite modern,
anyone,
weren't they, at that time? And the streetcars, okay.
I think now we're where, Farwell?
You're looking toward the northeast corner of Kellogg and Main Street. There's the water tower that you referred to earlier, built in 1891, and it was a wood water tower with metal bands around it. The structure was basically a wooden structure.
So on the lot where the 1915 municipal building was built, there was a water tower and that one-room city council chambers.
Right.
And I think this building that we're looking at now is still there today.
It is, and it was built the same year that the water tower was, about 1891, by Judge Stevens, district court judge whose home originally was in Ames. He and his wife moved to Boone when he became a district judge, I believe. And that building, interestingly, in about 1905 or 6, was divided into two buildings. As you're looking at it there, the entire second floor was one big room, and that was the where they had high school graduations and plays, and opera house they called it. And there was a stairway in between there. I don't see it here now. Later on, there was an exterior stairway when I was a boy on the west side. And today it's two buildings. If you look carefully at that building today, you'll see that there's a division right in the middle of it, and a little change in the half of that peak is still there.
Well, I walk by this building every day, and I know on the first floor on the corner of Main Street and Kellogg, it's a toy store.
That's right.
Now we're looking at Main Street, I think, from the west, and that is the interurban.
Yeah, you're looking west from the Duff Corner, right?
And I guess this is on a snowy day, and I think in 1915 the population, if I'm not mistaken, of Ames was about 5,000.
Right, about 5,000.
Now this is a little earlier slide that we picked out, and one of the reasons, as you can see, that we picked it out is that in the far distance you see that big smokestack. That's Ames's electric plant.
Right.
And that Ames, it's still a city-owned, and I think we just saw our 100th anniversary.
That's right. It had been built in 1896.
Wow. And this is showing Main Street as a dirt road, and I think it continued to be a dirt road till 1910. Is that correct?
That's right. And they paved it with wooden block. The first carload of wooden block arrived in March of 1910.
Actually, we're going to see a slide of what that wooden block looked like. It's hard to imagine that the first paving was actually wood.
Yeah.
If we look now, this is kind of a neat slide, and I'm glad you picked it out for us. This shows, obviously, if Main Street was a dirt road, it must have become very dusty in the summer and very muddy in the winter. And as I understand it, the town merchants got together and hired this man who drove the water wagon up and down just to keep the dust down.
That's
Probably
right.
had to do it several times a day. And I got to looking at this slide and thinking, I wonder if that idea couldn't be used today to wash down the bird droppings on Main Street that have been so controversial.
Might be a good idea.
Now we're looking at a 4th of July celebration, and this is a really neat slide because if you look real close, you can see that stairway on the side of the toy store that Farwell talked about remembering. And then they're marching on the first surfaced area in Ames, which is, they're marching down Kellogg onto Main Street. And if you look real close, you can see those wooden blocks.
Right.
And in the far background, you see the tower of the church, Methodist Church, and in front of that is the Baptist Church, which, of course, has been long since torn down. And then you see that little building, and that was the 1886 City Hall.
The year for this picture was 1913.
So it was just before it was torn down.
And these children are turning onto Main Street to go east.
On 4th of July parade.
Yeah.
Now, I think we're going to see the leadership of our community that took the bold step and put it up for a vote. And as I understand it, the vote was very, very much in favor of going ahead and spending the money for the City Hall, the new municipal building. And Farwell, I think you told me that for every 10 votes in favor, there was only one opposed.
I think the vote was 332 in favor and 32 opposed. That's
wow.
About close to 10 to 1.
And I think if we look at this slide again, Farwell, you might name who our mayor and some of the leadership was at that time.
Well, the fellow in the center, in the front row, is Parley Sheldon, who ultimately we called him our perennial mayor.
Right.
He was a mayor of Ames, I think, 17 years over a 32-year period. Not all contiguous, but...
Well, he must have been a great leader for community development, because the names of these gentlemen are etched in marble as you come in the City Hall, the new Jacobson Youth and Family Center, and his name is prominently right at the top. Next, we're going to be going through the years showing what the municipal building looked like. I think we're now in the 20s, and I think it's neat to look at these windows. And as you know, Youth and Shelter Services is preserving and has preserved the outside of the building. And one of the first steps we took was to take the windows out and put new windows in, which are identical and made to order to the original windows that were in the building. If you look at the windows today, they're identical to the ones you're seeing in this slide.
Looks very nice, too.
Now, why would we have next, we're going to look at a slide of the knoll. Why would we have a slide of the knoll, Farwell?
Well, as I understand it, the same architect designed the knoll building. That was in around 1900, I believe, and then they Lieb, Norse, and Rasmussen firm was the firm that designed our City Hall in 1915.
And you will also, as you come in the new Youth and Family Center, will notice, the public will notice that as you come in, the architects' names are also etched in marble, and we've preserved the vestibule there, and it really looks nice. It's all white marble, real thick, and it's all been cleaned up. And one of the reasons this is a historic landmark is the fact that these are famous architects, no longer in business, from Des Moines, and they did a number of buildings in Ames, and I think they did the Des Moines Council, or the Des Moines City Hall, which is on the National Register of Historic Places.
Yeah, in Des Moines, yeah.
Next, we're going to look at a couple of buildings that went up about the same time, and this is a very recognized building. And Farwell, tell us when this went up.
Well, that was 1915 and 16. It was finished in 16, dedicated, I think in May or June of 1916, by Mayor Sheldon. Ever since 1902, there had been a lot of talk about Ames needing a good hotel facility. We had people coming to Ames to visit the college, for example, famous artists, you know, on the artist series, and they had to go to Des Moines.
Yeah, to stay
overnight. And we had two old hotels that were not adequate during that time period. And finally, after various ideas had been explored and considered, Parley Sheldon said that he would put up the money for a hotel. I think the amount was $65,000 of his own money.
Farwell, if we notice on the slide, it says new and absolutely fireproof, and I think fire safety was a big issue back then because we had the horse-drawn fire wagon, and a couple of years before the new City Hall, the 1915 Municipal Building went up, a number of buildings on Main Street burned to the ground, didn't they?
We had 2 or 3 major fires. 1886 burned out 3 or 4 buildings between Kellogg and Douglas on the north side of Main Street. And then in the following year, 1887, we had a fire that took out 4 or 5 buildings. I'm not sure of the number, but several buildings again on the north side, on the east of Douglas Avenue.
So fire safety was probably also a key to getting the 1915 municipal building passed, because I think it included, as you know, the fire station. I think people wanted to modernize and have a better equipped fire station.
Right. That 1887 fire was what promoted the interest in developing a water system for the city.
Right.
Prior to that time, the city did pay the Chicago Northwestern for the right to hook onto their
water supply. Wow.
Right. One thing about the hotel in passing, and that is that Parley Sheldon took the Munn father and son, H.L. Munn and his son, into partnership on that, and together they built a much larger hotel. So it became known as the Sheldon Munn.
Sheldon Munn.
Yeah.
Well, now we're going to look at a few slides of buildings that were in existence in 1915. Our new electric plant, and Ames had a new library, and this is the Masonic Temple, which of course is on the opposite corner from the 1915 Municipal Building. Went up about the same time as well, and was the Masonic Temple then, and is today the Octagon.
That's right. Now that building was the result of a plan that had been advanced by the Chamber of Commerce. The idea was that we'd have a new hotel and a new office building and a city hall all in one complex.
Wow.
Between Douglas and Kellogg. And as things turned out, we did not proceed exactly on that plan, but we did end up, all in 1915 and 16, with a new city hall and a new hotel, and then Captain Greeley, who owned these lots in here, he had said he would come in on the other plan if they voted to, announced he would build this building. And he was going to build a 2-story building, and then he took the Masonic Lodge in and they took the third floor and had a 99-year lease on the third floor, and that's why they call it the Masonic Building. Yeah.
Well, and it was also designed by the same architects who did the Knoll and the City Hall. Now, at the same time, I think 1915 was the year this building opened, and you spoke of Captain Greeley, and I think his wife had passed away, and her memory, think of what a wonderful man this was, who he donated the land, and I think the first building that we're looking at right now, which is today
right.
Mary Greeley Medical Center.
In December 1915, the same year that the City Hall was being built, and the same year that the hotel was being built. Right. In December, Captain Greeley announced his plan to build and give to the city a hospital in memory of his wife, who had died in the last day of December in 1914.
What's remarkable to me is all the building that was going on at that time, and the development, and the fact that all of this was happening just about the same time, and Ames was only with a population of 5,000 people.
That's right. And the same month, in December 1915, the City Council voted to pave between 7 and 8 miles of residential streets in downtown Ames.
So when we talk about development today, it seems like, gee, it's far exceeds whatever happened in the past. And boy, if you look at our population back then and the vision that those people had, it was really an exciting time.
And at the same time, they dramatically increased the size of that light plant that you saw.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
At the same time.
And thank goodness Ames has held on to that. It's one of our prized possessions. Now we're going to see some other buildings which were in existence at that time, and this was our high school, Farwell. And the reason the dates, I think you can see the dates in the corner, is it 1911?
1911, 1937. It was Ames High School. It became a junior high adjunct to the school system, not as a high school. The high school that is now the building we're in today,
the new City Hall,
was opened in the fall or September of 1939.
And now this is now the parking lot in front of the City Hall,
right.
Isn't it?
This building was torn down in 1981. It actually was occupied first in 1912, I believe, in the fall of 1912. I went to high school in that building.
Did you? Did you?
I graduated.
Well, I know a lot of people remember that building. Yeah. I myself never did see it, but it was a very nice-looking building. I think we see next a slide of our first mechanized fire truck in front of the fire doors. Now, I think people need to realize that originally this end of the building, which is the fire station end of the new Jacobson Center, is now called the Variety Club Family Education Center. This actually housed horses and had hay in it, and they actually had that fire wagon, and I think Ames was very proud when they were able to become mechanized.
That's right. Well, I remember very well the fire wagon that used to sit in that doorway. They had the harness was on a sort of a suspended frame. So all they had to do was back the horses in and drop the harness and strap it, and away they went.
Wow.
And it was only about a year after the City Hall was in use that they had the horse-drawn wagon. Then they got, this was La France. And as you can see from looking at these fellows, they were very proud of their new fire wagon, right?
Farwell, you were there the cold winter last January, cold winter day, when we discovered the time capsule. And if you look in the floor there, you see a little tin box. And we opened that box that day, and inside were items, 85-year-old items that had been very carefully put together. And they had a time capsule in just above the cornerstone that has now all been preserved. In the slide here, you see Kathy Zveck and Farwell in the background there, and the historian, the preservationist from Iowa State, Do you recall his name?
Ivan Hanthorne.
Ivan Hanthorne, wearing white gloves as he looked at the items. It was a very exciting moment to open the time capsule. And at some future time, Farwell, I'd like to do another show where we look at the items, because you are now cataloging them and getting them ready to be placed in storage at the Ames Public Library.
Right.
Here are some of the items, and the very first one, membership of the Mono Club. Do you remember what that was?
Well, that was a club or group of Ames young businessmen. It was actually made up of fellows that today might be in the Junior Chamber of Commerce, for example.
So that's sort of the predecessor to the chamber.
In a way it was, the same age group. They were very musical, and I think they did a lot of singing and so forth. And they met in several different locations in the second floors of several buildings in downtown Ames. And when the present Ames Tribune building, or the Tribune building, was built, the entire second floor.
That's where they met?
It was the Monoclan.
Oh, wow.
It was their room.
Interesting name.
And they existed until about World War II time, I do believe.
Well, as you can see from the list here, Farwell, there were a lot of photographs and postcards, and it is remarkable how well they were preserved over that 85 years, and I'm so glad that we have them. And in particular, of great interest was a photograph of William West, the first mayor of Ames, a really fine photograph of him.
Right.
Well, now we are looking at the Ames Police Department in the 40s, and one of the reasons we picked out this slide is that you see that trellis or lattice work above the door. That has all been restored, and the light fixtures we've returned to the building. And I think that the neat thing about it is, the pride that we're seeing in the faces there. You know, I look at that slide and I wonder if Chief Ballantyne was there then. He seems like he's been in the Ames Police Department forever, but I'm sure he's not in that slide.
He's not in that one. Chief Bill Cure is in the center in the light suit.
Okay.
That's Bill Cure. And he was our chief of police for a number of years. I can't put the exact dates on, but he was the chief of police throughout the 20s and into the 30s, maybe a bit later. To his left, on the far left, beginning with a tall fellow, his name was Erickson, I believe, later was a chief. And Morris, I think, the next fellow, I think at one time he was a chief of police. And on Cure's left, that'd be to the right of Bill Cure as we look at the picture, was a fellow by the name of Jones that was on the force for a long time. Beyond that, I can't see distinctly enough to remember the names.
Well, I think that the building, of course, was first known as a municipal building.
Yes.
And then it became really known as the public safety building. You were around at the day of the dedication of the building, weren't you?
I was, but I conceivably was not present when the actual dedication.
I would like to think that 50 years from now, or 100 years from now, when the new time capsule that we're putting in is open, actually we want it to be opened in Iowa's tricentennial, which I think is 2040 something. It'd be 2140. Yeah, not 146. That somebody will be doing, maybe not a slideshow, maybe it'll be three-dimensional show about the conversion of the municipal building into the Youth and Family Center. I think for many years to come, it will continue. It may not be known as that name, who knows, in the future, but I'll bet you it will still be serving the public in a significant way, and I'll bet that building that was built to last will still be here 150 years from now. And I think there will be a lot of pride that not only the building was saved, but that it's being put to a good use in serving the children and families of our future.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
I thank you, Farwell, for helping me describe the very interesting history of the municipal building, and history will continue into the future, and I think for many years to come, people will look back at this phase and say, thank goodness the City Council did approve saving
Right.
this building. Thank you for joining us.
Yep.